Welcome everyone, this is Josh Rubin from East West Healing, and today we have episode 22 of Conscious Nutrition. Today we're going to be talking about thyroid medication. Should you or shouldn't you? Now just keep in mind that we are not doctors. We're not trying to play doctors, and we do not prescribe or tell anyone to go on or off their medication. So the purpose of this episode is really just intended to educate you and provide you with the information that you need in order to understand yourself, what's going on, and make a better decision based on what you feel is right for you. Okay? Before we get started, one of the most important things, well, there's a few important things. And the first is, as always, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in the comment section below, we offer a free 15-minute complimentary session. This is a chance for you to kind of build a relationship with us, ask some questions, kind of hear our approach, and how we might be able to help you through this process. So I'm going to put that link in the comment section below. Secondly, there we go. We have what is something we're actually really proud of. We get a lot of great feedback on it. And it's once again, it's complimentary. So I'm going to put the link below. It's our Restoration Thyroid audio series. It's a 7-part audio series on how to heal your adrenals, your thyroid, aka your metabolism, with food. So it takes you through the process of kind of our philosophy. And at the same time, I think it's great because it gives people a baseline understanding of who we are, where we're coming from, what our philosophy is. So if you haven't checked it out, please check it out. Even check it out before contacting us, because it really helps you understand who we are and allows you to connect with what we're talking about, right? Because if you call us and say, what supplements I should take, right, you'll listen to that and understand that for us, that foundation has to be there first before we even talk about that. And 99% of the time, when we get to that point, you won't need the supplements because you've really regulated your physiology with food. So definitely subscribe to that. That is in the comment section. Thirdly, of course, if you're watching this now or in the playback, please share it, please like it, please comment. We'd love to hear where you're from, if you have any questions, what you want to hear about on future episodes. So definitely, please like it, share it, comment below. Alright, so it's today's topic. And lastly, before we start, obviously you're seeing that my wife is not here. Believe it or not, our son's just not napping this week. It's that simple. So it's hard for us with this new schedule trying to figure it out. So if you have any specific questions for Jeannie or women in particular, you can definitely post them below, put her name next to it, and she will get to those as soon as possible. So here's the thing, and lastly, of course, if you have questions as we're going through this, please post them below, and we will get to those questions as we go through this. What's up, Diego? So, this is probably one of the most common questions that we get. My doctor prescribed me medication. Should I take it? My practitioner prescribed me medication. Should I go buy it online? Should I get it in Mexico? I'm on thyroid medication. It's not working. Should I go off it? Now, once again, as I said, we're not doctors. So the intention of this is to educate you, right? To really bring up some of the key points that we've kind of researched, some of the key points that, sorry, let me plug my phone in before this dies, actually. Some of the key points that we've experienced with working with clients in this industry for the past 18 years. And just some of the things that we understand based on human physiology from a common sense standpoint. So the first thing is, we know that the most common medication that is prescribed for hypothyroidism is T4, right? You could call it Synthroid, you could call it levothyroxine, and they're coming out with new drugs all the time. Unfortunately, from our standpoint, this is probably one of the worst things you could take. It's very anti-thyroid and very cookie cutter. Think about it. You get labs done. Someone else gets labs done. Some people just get TSH tested. Some people get T4, reverse T3. They get more than just TSH tested. But a lot of the time it's just TSH. No matter what, everyone gets put on T4. So what's the point of doing all the labs? Everyone. I haven't really met, there's very few people whose doctor will prescribe a T3 or a T4, T3 mix, right? You have to buy it or go see a naturopath. So the most common thing is they're giving everyone T4. They're giving everyone the same medication, no matter what labs are done, and what values are actually coming out, whatever they're testing. So from that standpoint, it's very cookie cutter, and we're not really looking at the individuals. So we know there is an error in that system or that philosophy. Why? Because it's not working, right? We're really not looking at the person, right? We're not looking at who they are, what is making up their physiology, and what do they need. It's the equivalent to someone needing a blood transfusion and not really understanding what their blood type was and just giving everyone the same blood type, right? That would lead to a disaster, right? So that's kind of the first thing you have to think about is, wow, like I am on T4. And I've talked to my other friends, they're on T4. And I've talked to other people in groups or forums, and they're on T4. What's the commonality? Commonality is everyone's getting put on the same medication no matter what, no matter who they are, what they've been through, and what's going on. So that's one thing we have to think about. The second is, which I'll talk about more as we go through this process, is what is the mechanism that led you to thyroid dysfunction, right? There's no single cause, right? Because we can have hypothyroidism, symptoms of hypothyroidism, adrenal issues, estrogen dominance affecting thyroid binding globulin, inflammation leading to conversion issues, blood sugar handling issues. Now, we all know that these are stress, right? But we have to understand the mechanism of where things are coming from in order to really work with a person. So that's another thing that most people aren't looking at. Like, why does this person have hypothyroidism or hypothyroidism-like symptoms, right? And these are the things I want to talk about today. It's not going to be every single thing, but they're the most common that we see, and it's going to shed some light on, oh my God, like maybe I should have went this route before I went on the medication. Because what happens is a lot of people just go on it when they don't need it, and you cause more of a problem, right? Or you feel better when you take it, and then later on you feel worse. Or you go on the medication, and you have to continually find the right dose. You have to continually do new labs. You have to continually switch to new medications, right? To really find the right combination for you. And the question is, why? So this is kind of the third thing, right? Why does this always happen? And of course, you've heard us say, one of the biggest things is you don't have a foundation to support these supplements, whether it be from an energy standpoint, a blood sugar handling standpoint, maybe you're in an inflammatory state, and inflammation from any stress within the system, of course, decreases thyroid receptor site activity, which means even though you're taking the medication, your cells can't utilize it, right? So inflammation itself actually can cause an issue. So even if you need the medication, it's not going to work. And you start taking it, it's not going to work because you have decreased receptor site activity because of the inflammation. And how many people do you know that are not inflamed, right? So Diego has a question. Some doctors even get pissed off if you ask about T3. 100%. So just to share with you, about 2 years ago, long story short, I overtrained for a big CrossFit competition, and I fried myself pretty bad. And I want to go to the doctor to get some labs done. And I just wanted a baseline to know where I'm at so I could heal myself with food, lifestyle modifications, etc. And then to test again to see where I'm at, just to see the progress I'm making, because I knew something was going on. Bottom line is, I saw some, issues with thyroid values. I know it wasn't anything crazy. And the doctor recommended T4. And I wanted to play with her a little bit and said, well, what about T3? Because I think it would help me more. And she actually got really aggressive with me. And I'm not even lying, face to face. So, yeah, there are doctors that get very upset. I don't know why, and I don't have the reason for that. But I do know that the way doctors think about it is that if you're low in T3 or there's a conversion issue, that you take T4 and you're going to make more T3, right? Now, if we think from a linear perspective, that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, you'll learn from the things that I'm going to talk about today that if there's a conversion issue, you take more T4, you're not going to convert it, right? Your cells won't intake it. You could have inflammatory issues. You could have elevations in testosterone from maybe taking testosterone, elevations in estrogen, which affect circulating levels of thyroid hormone, right? So thyroid hormone is bound to thyroid binding globulin, right? Which makes it inactive. Anytime we can't detoxify estrogen, we have a vitamin A deficiency, a progesterone deficiency, and estrogen is dominant, thyroid binding globulin goes up. So it binds more thyroid, which makes it less bioavailable to the system. But you think you have hypothyroidism, you don't. You just have maybe a detoxification issue. Maybe you're on testosterone therapy. Maybe you're on the birth control pill. Maybe you're taking estrogen bioidentical hormones or estrogen creams, whatever it may be, right? Or you just can't detoxify estrogen. Now we have an issue. You're taking something you don't need, but the real issue is you're going to have a conversion issue because indirectly of something else, right? So we always have to look at this thing. And lastly, the reason you constantly have to change your medications when you're on it is because a lot of people are on medications, they're working with different doctors, different naturopaths, and they're not really paying attention to what medications affect the conversion of thyroid hormone, or even what medications beside thyroid medication, right, that you're taking that will affect the conversion of thyroid hormone, but how your cells utilize the thyroid hormone. So I have a list here, and just to read that list, you have to think about it. If you're on a thyroid medication and you're taking antibiotics, antifungals, antidiuretics, any anti-diabetic medications, stimulants, cholesterol-lowering medications like statins, any type of heart medications, hormone replacement like I just talked about, pain medications, antacids, and psychoactive medications like Ativan, etc. All these medications affect how your thyroid medication that you're taking is actually going to work, right? So you're kind of just spinning the wheels. So think about these things. Number one, if you're on a medication, think about these things if you're thinking about taking medication, and thinking about these things if you're on one and you're constantly doing labs, you're constantly trying to find a new medication to work for you, and you're constantly trying to find a new dose, okay? And remember, if you have any questions, please post them in the comment section, and I will definitely answer your questions if you're watching now or even on the playback. So, what are some of the reasons why you have hypothyroid-like symptoms and seem that you might need medication and your doctor's prescribing it and you're saying, well, should I take it? Or if you're on it and it's not working, these are the things to think about. And these are some of the most common things that we see. And the first, which I think is, I'll probably say this for every single one of them, is the most common, is a pituitary dysfunction, right? So pituitaries, like, if I put my finger straight back into my brain here, straight back into my brain here, and they met, it's kind of like a small, area of, let's just say the brain, to simplify it. It's very small, and it's part of the HPA axis. Of course, it integrates with the adrenals, the thyroid, testosterone production, etc. So when you see an HPA dysfunction, what happens is we're really seeing just a pattern that is based on elevated cortisol. And, of course, that can happen from anything. Let me finish this and I'll get to some of your questions. So, of course, it could be from a stress, it could be from emotional stress, it could be from inflammation, on and on and on. But the bottom line is this: stress is the perceived need for sugar. So anytime the body is in a stress state, it utilizes more sugar to help us fight inflammation. If there's not enough sugar there stored in the liver to help us convert that thyroid hormone to be used as energy to help us produce more energy to get through this inflammatory state or the stress state, what happens? We release excess cortisol to break down our tissues to meet our body because we're not meeting our own body's demands. And this is when people think, well, I have high cortisol, I have adrenal fatigue, I need to take pregnenolone. No, you need to regulate how you're living and how you're eating through blood sugar regulation to de-stress your own system, to take the burden off, right, the pituitary, bringing cortisol levels down, because cortisol is a glucocorticoid, meaning glucose. It is released to regulate blood sugar when you can't do it yourself. So anytime we have elevated cortisol, it could be from an infection, chronic stress, emotional, physical, etc., pregnancy, blood sugar fluctuations, hypoglycemia, hyperinsulinemia, anything, right? All this stress from an acute state leading into a chronic state, which is most of our society, basically fatigues the pituitary and affects thyroid hormone, right? So messages are not being sent. We're not getting a lot of thyroid hormone. This usually will lower TSH and lower T4 and, of course, T3, right? We're getting a low TSH, low T4, low T3. So we're not getting signals from the pituitary, and that's why we're not producing thyroid hormone, right? And I think this is the most common thing for most people. Most people are going. They're not eating enough food. They're not eating enough of the right food. They're emotionally stressed. They don't have enough downtime for themselves. They're working a lot. They come home. They have children. Their children are busy, right? We're on our phones. We're on a computer, right? So it never stops. And this, when we're doing that, we've talked about this a million times, you know, it's almost like at rest, your physiology is in a stress state, and you're running from a line. You're running a marathon, even at rest. So with that stress, with that inflammation, comes elevated cortisol. That elevated cortisol, after a long period of time, fatigues the pituitary, so it doesn't send out signals. We don't send out signals, we're not going to be able to produce or convert thyroid hormones. So we get a low T4, sometimes a low T3, but usually a low TSH, right? So we had some questions. How would being on testosterone replacement therapy prevent conversion? It is because of aromatase estrogen. The excess production of testosterone. So when people are on it, sometimes it's not regulated. Sometimes they're not doing labs, and they're at like 1,400 micrograms versus maybe they should be on like 600, 800. Not on, but have that value in their blood. So that extra excess conversion, number one, can bind up thyroid can make more thyroid binding globulin within the system, which binds a thyroid hormone, which makes it less bioavailable, right? Secondly, which is probably more common because most people get that under wraps quicker, is, yes, the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. And I see this a lot with people or men, because I work with a lot of these men, and they take testosterone therapy and they think it's going to be amazing, but they still have erectile issues, libido issues, energy issues, etc. And the reason is because of really everything I'm going to be talking about today. They still have stress within the system. And that's 99% of the time why I believe most men go on it when they shouldn't. They don't have type 1 hypogonadism, right? They don't need it. They have type 2 hypogonadism, right? The problem is there's no signals coming out because of pituitary dysfunction, because of cortisol, stress, etc., right? And cortisol and testosterone always run inverse. So what happens a lot of the times is these men are getting higher dosage shots, and when they get that shot, initially you'll see a surge in estrogen, so it can affect thyroid hormone conversion. So a lot of the times they need to take like aromatase inhibitor when they're getting their shots to help prevent that. So, but I would have to say I see the whole thyroid binding globulin issue more in women than men. It's just something to think about when your doctor says you need the medication. Well, think about maybe are you on testosterone therapy, and maybe you need to look at your levels or your estrogen levels and prolactin levels. That's something else you want to look at. What other physiological states impact T4 to T3 conversion outside selenium, iodine, insulin? It's just all the stuff I'm talking about today. It's all the stuff I'm talking about today, right? Pituitary dysfunction, that's number one. The other things I talked about in regards to medications you're taking, inflammation, elevated testosterone, elevated estrogen, etc., right? All the things I talked about the first kind of half of this Facebook Live that we're doing, as well as pituitary dysfunction. The second would be underconversion of T4 to T3. And remember, 90% of the conversion of thyroid hormone that's produced by the thyroid happens in the liver, right? We store sugar from the food we eat, from the food frequency. We use that to convert T4 to T3, right? Inactive to active thyroid hormone, and this is used within the cell. That conversion of the thyroid hormone is used within the cell to produce energy, and energy helps us regulate our sympathetic nervous system, our parasympathetic nervous system. Helps us to regulate whether we're going to be in the stress state all the time or not. It's going to dictate whether or not we're in an inflammatory state or we are in an energy-producing, harmonic, balanced state, right? So anytime we have elevated cortisol, anytime we're not storing blood sugar, anything like excess estrogen, anything that, even taking thyroid medication when you don't need it, anything that impairs the body's ability to convert T4 to T3 will affect conversion issues. Now, as I said earlier, most doctors think, well, there is a conversion issue, right? We're seeing, normal to low TSH. We're seeing T3 that's sometimes low, and they say, well, let's give you more T4. This is a problem, because if someone has high cortisol levels, they're not regulating their blood sugar. They're on medications that are affecting the conversion of T4 to T3, right? They're in an inflammatory state. Those are the things you have to fix to help with that conversion. You don't need the thyroid medication. You have to fix the very things that are affecting the conversion of thyroid medication, or affecting the signals coming from the pituitary that are not allowing us to convert thyroid hormone, right? So that would be the second one. The third one is something I already kind of touched upon, which is hypothyroidism due to high thyroid binding globulin. And this happens from usually estrogen dominance, the most common, as I mentioned, as well as high levels of testosterone. So as we know, thyroid is bound to thyroid binding globulin in the blood. Anytime estrogen goes up, we see issues with increased levels of thyroid binding globulin, right? And what happens is that binds all that active thyroid hormone. So now there's less bioavailable thyroid hormone available to the system. So we get, low levels of thyroid hormones in our lab. And we see this a lot as well in women, I should say, when they are diabetic or pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, that have PCOS, that are hyperinsulinic, or have insulin resistance, both men and women. So that's the most common you see with the thyroid binding globulin. So think about that with regards to blood sugar. Maybe you're hyperinsulinic, and that's the reason that you're not converting thyroid hormone. Maybe you're not regulating your blood sugar. Maybe there's some stress in your life that's affecting your conversion. Because I think the most common thing is, we don't feel well. We're eating and living in a certain way that we're not connecting with. We go see our doctor. They give us a medication. But we haven't changed anything. And we take the medication, and we wonder why it's not working, right? Because those blocking factors are there, whether it's a stress, whether it's cortisol, blood sugar, inflammation, estrogen, etc. And to be honest with you, a lot of the times, it's all of them, right? And we have to begin to say, okay, well, I'm not going to chase my symptoms. I'm just going to look at altering how I'm living. I'm going to look at changing my diet, eating more frequently, eating more metabolic foods, to begin to regulate my physiology, to help support health. And that's really what it comes down to. We have a question here from Sharon on 2 meds for hypothyroidism just the last 4 years. I'm 66. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Obviously, there's a lot to look at, especially the older people get, the less metabolic they get. Aging is a stress. Of course, we produce less hormones. That doesn't mean you're out of luck. That doesn't mean you can't support your system with food. Of course, we always tell people this, whether you're on medication or not, you always need food as a foundation, right? You always need the quality of food and the metabolic foods that we recommend, as well as food frequency. Why? Because think about it. If we eat digestible metabolic foods that our body can utilize, and utilize it to store energy via food frequency, what do? We take the burden off the pituitary, right, and the adrenals, so we're regulating that pituitary dysfunction. We're taking the burden off the gut, the liver, etc., of feeding it good food, so we can help the body detoxify estrogen. So now we're helping with the thyroid binding globulin and lowering that, right? We're helping with storing energy so we can make a conversion or help with a conversion issue over time. This stuff doesn't happen overnight, right? So we're really doing everything at once through creating health and eating a certain way versus chasing the symptoms, right? Because it leads to nowhere. You're just constantly chasing your symptoms, and when you got diagnosed at 30 years old, before you know you're 40, 50, 60, and nothing's truly worked, and you're on the same medication, right? So if you really do have a thyroid issue, you might need it for a short amount of time. You need to create that foundation to support your system. Secondly, what we see 99% of the time is people have functional hypothyroidism. And they have, we've talked about this in another video, but we're seeing an issue with these conversion issues, a pituitary issue, estrogen issues, thyroid binding globulin, etc. We're seeing something within the system that's blocking something. And people go on the medication, it just makes things 10 times worse, right? And it leads down this path of taking it when you don't really need it. It makes things worse. And really, I'll be honest with you, there's a simple way to test for this. So you have to think about it. The most common lab test for diagnosis is TSH. That alone is useless, pretty much. If you're going to do a thyroid panel, you need to do TSH, your antibodies. You need to do T3, free T3, T4, free T4. Did I say TSH? Yeah, add that in there. TPO, thyroid binding globulin. You need to test parathyroid hormone, your cholesterol values, etc. Right? That's a full panel. So without that, it's pretty much useless. But secondly, none of these things really test the ability of your cells to uptake thyroid hormone. None of them do, right? So if you get a lab done and your doctor says you're hypothyroid, you need medication, say, awesome, I'll be back, I'll email you in a week. Go home, take your body temperature and pulse in the morning when you wake up in bed, right? Normal is 97.8 to 98.6. If you fall within that, you're in the norm. Take your pulse as well, laying down. Norm for that, for me, I like to see people like anywhere from 70, 75 to 85 tops. No higher, right? That's going to give you your baseline. Okay, it's going to tell you where I'm at. Like, what's going on? Am I hypometabolic? Am I not storing energy? Most people are going to have a low temperature and a low pulse, or a low temperature and a high pulse, or they might have a normal temperature and a high pulse, right? Either way, they're all not within the norm. Start making some changes. Start eating more frequently. Start eating more fruits and roots. Start eating more non-inflammatory proteins. If you're eating 3 meals, eat 4 meals. If you're eating 4 meals, eat 5 meals. Just do that consistently, let's say, for about a month. Take your temperature and pulse throughout the day. After lunch and after breakfast, about 20 minutes each day, or a couple days a week. If you see highs and lows throughout the day from your morning temperature, you don't have hypothyroidism. You have a conversion issue, you have a pituitary issue. You're basically, what you're seeing are those fluctuations because you have energy coming in, it's going out, and you have conversion issues. There's no stability, right? That instability is usually an adrenal issue. I don't mean adrenal like you have adrenal fatigue. I mean adrenal issue, meaning the stress, you're not regulating your blood sugar, so the thyroid doesn't have fuel to burn. And that's why you're seeing your temperature and pulse go up and down. So let's say you wake up with a 96.5 temperature, 65 pulse. You eat, it's 96.6. You eat again, it's 97. You eat again, it's 95. You eat again, it's 98. That instability, right, is blood sugar, it's stress, it's cortisol, right, from not meeting your body's needs for so long. If you wake up, let's say you're 96.5 again, we'll use that. It could be any number. And you're making some solid changes day after day, week after week, and your temperature never changes. It's very stable. It's 96.5, 96.6, 96.5, 96.6. It never really changes. The values stay very close. Okay? Then you have a true thyroid issue, right? And I have to say this, that probably within all my time of doing this, I've come across maybe 3 to 5 people that have truly had a thyroid issue, and that's being generous. Okay? So that's going to tell you, do I need medication or not? Should I think about maybe changing how I'm living, changing how I'm eating? Maybe think about the traumas in my life that have led me here and do some work on that end, right? There's a lot of things that we can do to kind of empower us so we don't have to take medication, okay? We have some questions here. I went to an alternative medical physician who tested me and tried the Nature Thyroid supplement, and it wasn't enough. I don't see him anymore. So what you're saying is by eating right, I can change that. I don't know enough about you. I don't know if you truly have hypothyroidism or not. I don't know what your stress levels are, what you're trying. I mean, there's just too many things. But what I'm saying is, whether you need it or not, yes, if you eat the right foods in the right way and the right frequency, that 99% of the time, you can either go off it at a certain point, you won't need it forever, or you can take a lower dose, or you might not even need it at all, 100%. Same approach for autoimmune, 100%. Do you have that panel written down somewhere so I can ask my current doc? I don't. But if you search online for a full thyroid panel, you can probably figure it out. I'll repeat it. You want to test for TSH, T3, free T3, reverse T3, T4, free T4, your antibodies, thyroid globulin, a full cholesterol panel, because that correlates with thyroid function, parathyroid hormone, and then your female hormones, since you're female, like estrogen, estradiol, progesterone, etc., because all that kind of correlates. You can even throw cortisol levels in there. So yeah, you want to see what's going on, but at the same time, you want to know what your body pulse, your body temperature and pulse are doing. I have my thyroid removed. I'm on 2 meds. Yeah, I mean, when you have your thyroid removed, you need that medication, unfortunately. Or fortunately, right? But the problem is, what happens is, so you're on T4 and Armor. You know, most people, what I find is they're constantly going up, they're constantly going down, and they're constantly getting labs done. So what I have found with these people is that if you really begin to live and eat in a way that supports health, you'll find those fluctuations get less. The amount of labs that you have to do get less. And the amount of medication that you have to be on, because you do, is less. It's not as drastic. So with people that don't have a thyroid, yeah, I mean, you need that thyroid medication. It's needed. You're not producing the hormones. So the last one would be thyroid resistance. We're seeing no issues with the thyroid. We're seeing no issues with the pituitary. There's basically a cell resistance to T3. Your labs are normal. We see this with PCOS, insulin resistance, stress, high cortisol, taking meds when you don't need them, right? And the bottom line is this. The thyroid hormone that you're producing or taking is not getting in the cell, right? And it's not getting in the cell because you're taking too much of it. And you're creating a thyroid resistance over time. And 99% of the time what happens is you develop thyroid symptoms, You feel horrible. You're constantly told, hey, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you, right? Because your labs are normal. But when you have low thyroid binding globulin, that's so hard to say. I don't know why. You are hyperinsulinic. You're insulin resistant. You have your PCOS. You have chronic stress, high cortisol, etc. It causes a thyroid resistance. The most common reason I see that people create a thyroid resistance is because they, number one, take a medication when they don't need it. Number two, they take it because it's cool and everyone's taking it online, so they buy it from Mexico. And that would be the most common. So what happens is you create a resistance when you don't need it. So now your body stops producing its own, and you take in too much, right? And now your cells say, I'm not going to open my door. So the thyroid keeps knocking on the door, but the cells won't let it in, right? And this creates even more of a problem over time, because we need that thyroid hormone to get in the cell to produce energy. So the less it does, of course, you're going to have fatigue, inflammation, etc. So it's almost like we have to go off it and let the body rid itself of it, build our body up nutritionally, and with anything else, whether it be working out or how we're living or breath work, etc. Build up the vitality within our system so we can really get our body working again. So it's almost like we have to move backwards a little bit before we move forward. And the thing is this, I'm breaking down these 3 to 4 to 5 different reasons, but they all crisscross, right? The bottom line is we have stress, we have inflammation, we have blood sugar issues, we have symptoms, diseases, disorders. This affects, number one, the conversion of thyroid hormone. Number two, it affects the receptor sites. Number three, it affects the ability of thyroid hormone to get in the cell. And that's the bottom line. Do we have another question here? I don't see any more questions. Yeah. So, and like I said, the reason for me to do this is, it is technical and it's tongue twisting, as you can hear me talk about it. It's really, the intention is to help people to understand what they're putting in their body. Because doctors say, take this, right? They say, take this shot, take this vaccine, and everyone's like, sure, I'll do it. Instead of really doing the research, instead of really understanding who they are, where they come from, and if they truly need it, right? So I can tell you that with the work that we're doing, myself and my wife, we do the same work, we just have different clients. We work with clients all over the globe, via phone, Skype, WhatsApp, etc. That if you create the right foundation, and you look at how you're living and say, I need to change. You look at how you're breathing and say, I need to change that. You look at how you're eating and say, it's not working for me anymore, right? How do I know? Well, I know by how I feel, my symptoms, my pulse and temp, my labs. Maybe I work with that first so I can create some change with my physiology. And maybe I won't need the medication, right? The other thing is, you do that, maybe you do need the medication for a short amount of time, but you're able to go off it, right? That's the most important thing. You shouldn't have to take it forever. Or even if you have to go on a glandular. But 9 times out of 10, everyone that I work with that comes to me and says, well, I bought thyroid medication because this person said I should, and I read it online, I'm taking glandular. They have insomnia, they get sweats, they have rapid heart rate, and their symptoms get worse. I was talking to a client today, right? She has hypothyroidism. Her doctor recommended her to take a thyroid medication, and her symptoms got 10 times worse. Why? Because she doesn't have hypothyroidism. And she created a thyroid resistance, right? She has trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma in her life, going keto, etc. So what's the real issue? Everything from conception till now, or the thyroid's not producing thyroid hormone? It's the traumas, right? It's the stress within the system. That's number one. Number two, we know she doesn't need it because when she took it, her symptoms got worse, right? And her pulses and temps on her initial assessment are all over the place. right? That instability tells me it's more of a pituitary, blood sugar, etc. issue than a true thyroid issue, right? So, Ivy has a question. What's the best diet you found? The diet that we do. This is what we do with people, right? So if you don't know about our work, as I mentioned, click the link below, Restoration Thyroid audio series. Download that now. You can subscribe. It's a free 7-part audio series about our philosophy, how to heal your adrenals and thyroid with food. That's our work. It's not an end-all be-all, but it's a place to get started so you can understand our work. We don't promote keto. We don't promote paleo. We don't promote methods. We work with principles. The principles of how the body works, the principles of biology, biochemistry, physiology, hormones, the principles of our body. And we, by understanding that, we know how to use food with human beings. We don't take human beings and put them into methods. Methods are many, principles are few. And that's the difference between what we're doing and everyone else. Okay, so the best diet that we recommended is the umbrella diet that we use with everyone, but how it's personalized and how it's used is different for everyone through the process of consulting, because we all have different backgrounds, different histories, different states of being. Okay, so definitely check that out. We have tons of YouTubes. You can go to our YouTube channel, East West Healing. We post daily on Instagram at Real Food Gangsters, and you can check out our Facebook page at East West Healing. Obviously you're on that right now. We have a lot of free content beside working with us one-on-one. So before I wrap this up for the day, does anyone have any questions for me? Don't be afraid to ask questions on the playback. We will get to them within 24 to 48 hours. As always, this is going to be on our Facebook page. We transfer it to the video section of the Facebook page, which is on the left-hand side. Click on videos. This is a playlist. As well as we put all these videos on our YouTube channel, which is East West Healing. If you want to stay in touch about future episodes, because we do this every single week, you want to subscribe to the Restoration Thyroid audio series, because within that you'll get an email from us every week letting you know of when these are, what time, etc. At first we did them Thursdays at 12. Then we moved it to Thursdays at 2:30. I hate to say this again, but we're going to have to move it. It's all based on our son, when we have a nanny, the best time, when he's napping, not napping, etc. So it's becoming a little bit of a gamble. So it probably will be changing. So if you want to be in the loop, follow us on our Facebook page or subscribe to the Restoration Thyroid audio series. So hopefully you enjoy this today. I know it's a lot of information to take in, but it's really, if you listen to it again, it makes a lot of sense, and it makes you understand that, hey, maybe I am stressed, or maybe I'm not detoxifying estrogen, or maybe, I'm taking medication, I don't need it, or maybe I am hyperinsulinic or stressed, etc. And maybe you're all these things, because 99% of the time you are, and that's affecting your thyroid hormone levels and your cell's ability to take it in. So maybe if I change just who I am and how I'm living to create change, that'll create a lot of impact on my physiology, so I won't have to take a medication, or it will allow me to go off. So if you have any other questions, post them below. Don't be afraid as well to click on that link about setting up your free complimentary 15-minute session. I will see you guys next week. I'm out of here. Peace.